Open Texas. So she's, my goodness. Oh, okay. Let me ask a couple of pertinent questions. That's awesome. But you, man, you keep bringing up some stuff, and it's got to. I know our listeners want to hear this. So, does Dr. Fauci have any money ties with this new drug?
You know, I can't personally speak to Dr. Fauci's financial connections, but what concerns me greatly, and I did put the references in my editorial, this last editorial, A Tale of Two Drugs, money.
Which was great. I read it. It was awesome.
Thank you. Well, and in my editorials, I have active links to the source documents, so people don't have to take my word for it. They can click on the link in the article and go read the original document where I took the information. But the NIH panel of experts that are recommending treatment in COVID-19, the very group that just recommended the use of remdesivir and recommended against the use of hydroxychloroquine, 9 of those experts have financial and research support and consultancies with Gilead Pharmaceuticals. In my opinion, medically, they should have recused themselves from making the medical recommendations if they could not give a balanced recommendation, because clearly the safety data on hydroxychloroquine over all of the years of the FDA keeping records and CDC keeping records, World Health Organization keeping records, and all the other countries using it, that safety data is far more impressive, widespread, and long-standing than anything that is even possible to have with remdesivir, because it's so new and still experimental. So to have the 9 people with financial ties, I mean, it's all there in the NIH website disclosures. Some are consultants for Gilead and paid a consulting fee. Some are getting their research grants from Gilead. Now, if people start researching who holds the patents on a lot of these medications and vaccines, then you will see NIH, CDC, the pharmaceutical companies, and you'll see Dr. Fauci's name among those, because as one of the researchers at NIH, it is common in academic medicine and research medicine for the physicians and scientists who are part of the development of the work to share in the patent. And royalties from patents vary, and financial compensation varies. I mean, one of my colleagues in GYN, for example, at my medical school, developed a new birth control pill, and he shares in the patent royalties on that particular product. That in itself is not, I mean, you can argue about whether that's appropriate or not, but that is not unusual. What is unusual, in my opinion, and what in this case in particular, given the enormous ramifications of their recommendations and the fact that the country is locked down, and that's the first time in our history that we've seen anything like that, I think it is ethically questionable and medically questionable that the experts recommending treatment had such conflicts of interest. And I think that appropriately, those particular people should have recused themselves from the recommendations that were made.
So true. Okay, Dr. Vui, now you brought this person up. I wasn't even aware of it until we talked a couple of days ago, but we got to hear your viewpoint on him. So we're about to talk just for a minute about the whistleblower that's been in the news in congressional hearings. He's called a doctor, but he's a PhD. He's not a medical doctor, and his name is Rick Bright. Could you tell Open Texas more about what's going on there?
Rick Bright is the former head of BARDA, which is one of the subsidiary agencies under the FDA. His career focus, he's a scientist whose career focus has been vaccine development and to a lesser extent involvement in some of the therapeutic medicines. Rick Bright was relieved of his duties as head of BARDA a few weeks ago and there was quite a flap about that. There was an article in Axios around that time, and that was that's a reference in an editorial that I will be putting together and have out next week. But in that article, Rick Bright was quoted as saying, and I'm going to read this to get it correctly, because there are a lot of, in my medical opinion, there are a lot of problems with this particular quote. This Dr. Rick Bright, PhD, not a physician, says specifically and contrary to misguided directives, I limited the broad use of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine promoted by the administration as a panacea, but which clearly lack scientific merit. That is his quote. He is bragging about the fact that he is one person in an agency under the director of the FDA and not in charge of all of this, that he overrode the directives from Secretary of Health and Human Services Rick Azar and Admiral Giroir, in the Public Health Service, both of whom, in their broader perspective and greater knowledge of the entire picture and the medical needs and the safety, both of them had directed the FDA to make the medicine available from the national stockpile for outpatient pharmacies and doctors and hospitals. This has not been a supply issue. We had Senator Johnson called me in early April after he heard an interview that I did in Milwaukee, and he picked up the phone, called me, and he said, "What's going on? We have ramped up production. We have gotten donations from pharmaceutical companies. We have 30 million doses of hydroxychloroquine sitting in the national stockpile."
Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you. And literally for the entire, since the first week of April, Senator Johnson and I have been working closely together with our medical organization, AAPS, and we have gotten him data, we have gotten him signatures on petitions to President Trump to open up the prescribing to outpatient early use. And so far, we have not been able to break through those roadblocks. Now, Rick Bright subsequently filed with the same lawyers that were attacking Justice Kavanaugh in his hearings, the lawyers that defended Christine Blasey Ford. Rick Bright has hired them, and he's now claiming that he's a whistleblower and he was being protected by the whistleblower statutes because he was alerting to a serious danger. Well, I take issue with that medically. I think he was unilaterally deciding that he had more power and authority and knowledge than people with much greater medical experience and knowledge and in superior roles in this administration, and went against their directives and admitted it. I mean, he's saying he did this.
Oh my goodness.
And I really I'm hard pressed to justify how one career bureaucrat, scientist in a limited role, has the power to prevent the thousands of doctors and patients across this country getting a medicine they need early in an illness that has caused so much death and destruction of our economy and our jobs and our businesses. And
my goodness.
We don't
Go ahead.
see, I did not see the Republicans taking a strong stand against what he did. And I've asked Senator Johnson whether or not it would be something that he could bring before his Senate Oversight Committee on government affairs. He's chairman of the committee. He certainly can call whomever he wants to testify, and we'll see what happens. But Rick Bright was the block in the FDA organization that blocked the FDA's emergency use authorization from being extended to outpatient therapy for all of us doctors to be able to use freely in our medical judgment with the patients.
So he blocked HCQ.
He put the words in the emergency use authorization. He admits it. It's in all of the documents that I've looked at that have come out as part of his interviews and his statements. The March 28th FDA emergency use authorization, and I took a screenshot of it when I looked it up that day it was issued, and it clearly says hospitalized patients. So in effect, what everybody thought, including myself initially, what we thought was an emergency use authorization approving hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19 was in fact a limited use to hospitalized patients, which then interfered with doctors being able to get it in the outpatient setting